The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. So first up, how do you feel about squirrels? I think squirrels are cute, but some people might think squirrels are a bit annoying. Squirrels are in a lot of places. You can see them at Da'an Park, and if you go to the United States, you can see squirrels in Central Park in New York. And where I come from, which is New England, the northeast of the United States, there are squirrels everywhere. And the squirrels might look a little bit different than what you're used to. The squirrels in New England are often gray squirrels. So their fur is gray, I think. Don't trust me, I'm colorblind. But the Tale of Squirrel Nutkin is this cute little story, and so we can try the first part of the story as Squirrel Nutkin goes to visit an owl. So, let's make sure I'm zoomed in enough. We can do a little bit smaller. Okay, perfect. So, let's get started. I'll read it first, and then we can talk about it piece by piece, and then we can keep on going. So let's get started. This is the tale. Sorry, I messed up already. This is a tale about a tale. A tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry, and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. Okay, the first part of this is pretty fun. This is a tale about a tale. So, these are called homophones. This is something you might learn in English class. You don't really hear it outside of English class, but we can learn it. H-O-M-O, homo, means the same. Phone means sound. So homophone are two words that sound the same, but the spelling is different and the meaning is different. So you have to be careful when you're reading or listening, because someone might say a word that sounds just like another word. So T-A-L-E is tale. That means story. T-A-I-L is also tail. That means the tail of an animal, the thing that comes off of their butt. And they're spelled differently, but they sound exactly the same. So sometimes if words are spelled differently, don't think too much. Don't say, oh, it should be tail or tail. No. You don't need to worry about that. They're exactly the same. Tail, tail. So T-A-L-E is a story. Tail is what an animal has. Here they have a capital T for tail, but that's just old-fashioned. It's an old style of writing. We don't do that usually. Usually it's a capital T only if it's someone's name, but not for just a noun like story, tale. So this is a tale about a tale. A tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. I don't think there's anything too difficult to hear. So a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel. So belong to means someone owns something. It's theirs. They have it. So the tale belonged to the squirrel. You can use this for anything. Belong to tells you who owns it, whose thing it is. So I'm drinking coffee from this really nice mug, and this coffee cup belongs to my friend. It's not my cup, it's my friend's cup. So it belongs to my friend. Good choice, right? So the tail belonged to a little red squirrel. Can you make a sentence with belong to? This computer belongs to me. These glasses belong to me. That the books behind me belong to my friend, right? Okay, so what is something that belongs to you? Maybe this cell phone belongs to me. Or, oh, did you borrow something? Oh, this pencil belongs to my brother. Something like that. Okay. And this squirrel's name is Nutkin. And he had a brother called Twinkleberry. It's a very cute name. Twinkleberry. Why is that cute? Well, twinkle is what a star does. When you look at the stars, the light kind of moves. When light moves a little bit like a star, that's called a twinkle. So the stars twinkle. And a berry is a fruit. So twinkleberry. You can think about a berry that's kind of like shiny. The light's moving on the berry. It sounds kind of cute and nice. So we're going slowly, but whatever. He had a brother called Twinkleberry and a great many cousins. A great many is an old-fashioned way to say a lot. It sounds, not old-fashioned, just kind of formal. In regular life, people don't say, I have a great many things to do. Maybe that's a British thing, but in the United States, we just say a lot of, or lots of, or many. Just many. But tons of, something like that. Maybe not. He had many cousins. Many is good, of course, but in regular life, we'd say a lot of. It's more casual. He had a lot of cousins. Okay. And they lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. So we talked about a wood when we were reading Benjamin Bunny. Well, what's a place with lots of wood, lots of trees? That's a forest. So a wood is like a small forest. So in American English, we'd say the woods. Instead of a wood, we'd say the woods. So my old house, the house I lived in when I was growing up, that house was in the woods. So there was not a forest, that sounds too big, but there were lots of trees around the house. Okay? They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. The edge means next to the end of something. So they're not in the lake, they're next to the lake, but very close. The edge of the lake. Okay. In the middle of the lake, there's an island covered with trees and nut bushes. And amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl, who is called Old Brown. So in the middle of the lake, there is an island. That's the first part. So it just tells you there's the lake. They live on the edge of the lake, and in the middle of the lake, there's an island. Okay? In the middle of the lake, there's an island. And then we describe the island. There's an island covered with trees and nut bushes. Okay? So there are many, many, many trees. It's covered with trees. and there are many, many, many nut bushes. So it's covered with nut bushes. So everybody knows what a tree is, but what is a bush? Well, a tree has a long trunk and then leaves up on top. And a bush is just like leaves close to the ground. Okay? So that's the difference between a tree and a bush. And so a nut bush is a bush that's close to the ground with lots of nuts on top, or on the branches. So the island is covered with trees and nut bushes. That sounds good for squirrels. They love to eat nuts. And amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree. Amongst is a preposition. It's a word telling you where stuff is. Oops, I went crazy with that line. Amongst is the same as the word among. Among and amongst. There's a game called Among Us that you might know. Or if you know some kids love the game Among Us. Or they did a couple years ago. So among and amongst means there are many different things around. Let's see if I can draw. Let's see, there are lots of circles. I don't have my mouse, so it's kind of hard to draw well. So there are lots of things around. Each circle is one tree. Let's say that. And among the trees, there's a hollow oak bush, or hollow oak tree. So that means like somewhere mixed in. Among is kind of like in the middle of many other things. Okay? So there are many, many trees, and in the middle of all of these trees, there's one hollow oak tree. Okay? You could use among or amongst for other things. Like there's a bookshelf behind me. So amongst all the books, there are some pictures. So there's a bookshelf with many, many books, but there are a few pictures in there. So amongst all the books, there are pictures. Or among the books, there are pictures. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree. So there are many, many, many trees around, and one of them, or in the middle somewhere, is a hollow oak tree. Hollow means empty, or it's empty on the inside. A mug is just, it's an open thing, and so an empty mug is just empty. But hollow is when something is closed, but the inside has nothing inside. So a mug is not really hollow, but you could have well, in front of me there's a lamp, and the lamp is like a big piece of glass. And the glass, it's not just one ball of glass, there's air on the inside of the glass, so it's hollow. Okay? So, like this oak tree, it's an old tree. The inside is empty. It's mostly closed. There are little holes, but it's mostly closed, but the inside is empty, where you could go inside the tree. So that's hollow. Okay. An oak is just a kind of tree. So amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl who is called Old Brown. So here's the owl flying in, and his name is Old Brown. Okay. So here are these cute squirrels, and what are they doing? Well, here's the lake, and they're getting on little rafts. They're trying to go to the island. They have to use little boats to get to the island. You can see here. Oh my gosh, so cute. One autumn, when the nuts were ripe, and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green, Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the wood and down to the edge of the lake. So, one autumn. There's a lot of letters here, but it sounds like autumn. Autumn. It sounds like O, then T-U-M. Autumn. But then the T sometimes sounds like a D. So if you say it fast, it sounds like autumn. Autumn. So one autumn. Autumn is the same as fall. It's the season we're in right now. So where the nuts are ripe and the leaves are changing colors. So one autumn when the nuts were ripe. Ripe is a word that means that food is ready to eat. Usually we use this word for fruit. So if an apple is too hard to eat, it's not ready to eat. But it's a little bit soft, it's ripe, and it's perfect to eat. A ripe fruit will be more sweet and a little bit soft, not too soft, and more delicious. So one autumn, when the nuts were ripe, and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green. So a hazel bush is another kind of bush, and the leaves are changing color. They're golden and green. So golden is a little bit like yellow. Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the wood and down to the edge of the lake. So the first part, I think, is not too hard. They came out of the wood, but then and down to the edge of the lake. Now, this is connected to the word came. They came out and, whoops, having trouble with clicking. They came out and down. So, down is not a verb. You can't say, I down to the edge of the lake. That doesn't work. You need a verb in front. So here, it's connected to the word came. The squirrels came down to the edge of the lake. Came is the moving word. Now, that sounds a little bit funny. Maybe it's British, maybe it's old-fashioned, but I would say they went down to the edge of the lake. So I would use the word go. Go becomes went in the past tense, right? So they went down to the edge of the lake. Okay? And then what did they do? They made little rafts out of twigs, and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. Each squirrel had a little sack in a large oar and spread out his tail for a sail. Oh, that's pretty fun. So they made little rafts out of twigs. Now, a raft is a very specific word. Now, this is not exactly a boat. A boat is something that goes on water, but a raft is something that goes on water that's completely flat. It's like a flat piece of wood that can float. So you can see in the picture, they're standing on this flat thing, and their rafts are made of twigs. If we understand what a twig is, we can understand this raft. So if it was you and me, we wouldn't use a twig, we would use pieces of wood. And so you could use pieces of wood and tie it together to make a raft. Let's see, I can use, but a twig is a very thin, small stick because these squirrels are very small they can use twigs and they won't sink. But you and me, we'd have to use sticks. So use many, many sticks and put them together like this and make a square or rectangle. And then connect them. And just like that, this can float and you can kind of get across the water. It's a little bit dangerous. If the water is moving too much, you might fall in, but it's enough to get across, right? So that's called a raft. And a twig is a very small piece of wood. So for you and me, a twig might be like this long and very skinny. But for a squirrel, that's perfect. You can use many twigs to make a little raft about this big. Okay? So they made little rafts out of twigs and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. The only tricky word here is paddle. Paddle is a verb for what they're doing right now. The thing they're holding is called an oar, but another name for it is a paddle. It's like a stick that's flat on the end, and you can use that to push you. So gently paddling away. This is similar to row. You row a boat, but a paddle is longer, and maybe you do it slower. You move the thing slower. So they paddle across the water. Okay? Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar. So a sack is a little bag, like a pouch, a little bag, or you could call it a pouch. A little bag, oops, not a bag, or a pouch. Oops, not pouch, pouch. They had each squirrel had a little oar. Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar. An oar is the thing they're holding. Like I said, it's similar to a paddle, which is why we use the word paddle. Okay? So an oar is that thing you use to push a boat. And spread out his tail for a sail. So on a boat, a sail is the thing that catches the wind. And the wind will push the sail. Usually it's a triangle of fabric. But here in this story, they're using their tails for sails. So that's pretty fun. And then, let's see. I think let's stop here for now. So they go visit the owl. And, well, are squirrels friends with owls? In real life, not really, because owls like to eat squirrels. So these squirrels have to be very careful around the owl. And so what they do, they go meet Old Brown the owl, and they try to ask the owl to let them take nuts from the island. And they have to be really careful and be polite and give the owl some gifts. So if they give the owl a gift, then the owl won't eat the squirrels, right? And then the owl will let them gather some nuts on the island. And our friend Squirrel Nutkin, he's with them, but maybe he's a little bit silly. So next time we can find out what happens with the owl and will they stay safe? Will they still be friendly with the owl? Okay? But for now, let's stop there. I think that's a good start. We learned some new words and phrases. And what we can do is we can read the part that we learned together one more time. And then next time we can go further into the story. Okay? So we took this pretty slow but I think that's a good way to practice a lot of the words and grammar. So I hope you feel like you learned something new. So let's read it one more time, and we can see what happens with the owl next time. So, The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. This is a tale about a tale. A tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. In the middle of the lake, there is an island covered with trees and nut bushes. And amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl who is called Old Brown. One autumn, when the nuts were ripe and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green, Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the wood and down to the edge of the lake. They made little rafts out of twigs, and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar, and spread out his tail for a sail. And next time we can take a look at what happens when they meet Old Brown and offer up some gifts. So I know, like I said, we're going slowly, but that's because we can do that together. If you're reading by yourself, you could read the whole story pretty quickly, but we can take our time and practice some tricky words and interesting ideas, right? So, I think we can stop here for now. I hope you're having a great weekend. I hope you had a good time today. We can continue the Tale of Squirrel Nutkin next time, okay? And if you have any questions, please leave a note and I will reply as soon as I can. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night and see you next week. Bye-bye.